Hello, I'm Mike Myers, President of the Society of Insurance Research, and welcome to this month's President's Chat, where I get to catch up with past presidents of the Society of Insurance Research, learn about their careers, their time with SIR, observations about the industry, and recommendations that they have for our members. Today, I'm with Herb Sauer, who is president of the Society of Insurance Research in 2008, a member for much longer than that, before and after. And today we're just going to catch up with Herb and see how he's doing. So, hey, Herb, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michael. And thanks very, very much for conducting these interviews. I really enjoy them. I hope other people enjoy them as much as I do. And it's fun to—
You and me both. I think between the two of us.
See everybody and just kind of catch up on what's going on. So I just can't commend you enough for taking the time to do this.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it's certainly my pleasure. I think you and me, we probably get a lot of it. I hope everybody else gets as much as we do, because it's really been a treasure talking to the past presidents and learning about the legacy that they created with SIR and in the industry. And I'm just happy to at least be a steward of the association for a little while and be able to share these stories with everyone else. But I really appreciate it. So why don't we start off, for those that might not know you, tell us a little bit about your career in insurance. What companies were you at? How did you get started?
Well, I can honestly say insurance was never on my radar screen. I came out of college in the mid 60s, late 60s, kind of ambivalent about a future. I liked engineering, but I hated just math for math's sake. But I loved that. I thought maybe aeronautical engineering, but I didn't really have a role model, or business role model or anyone. And then, as I think I had mentioned to you at some prior time, I went to the best graduate school you could go to, which was, whether you liked it or not, which was the military, and learned a lot there. And I thought that set me off in a particular direction, mostly in the field of security. And excuse me, itchy nose. Took a job, came out of the military, just decided not to make a career of it. I seriously considered it, but it was just, I had been away overseas for 3 years and hadn't been home and was facing more time overseas, if that's what I wanted to do. So I took a job in security. And shortly after I took the job, I felt secure and we had an income. I went ahead and bought a house, took every nickel I had and bought a house. And a week before the closing, they sold the company. And basically I was out of work. So I went to a headhunter and I said, what do I do? And they said, well, you're in Hartford, Connecticut. It's the insurance capital. And so you ought to think about insurance. And so I said, well, hey, do I get paid? And they said, yes. I said, okay, then I'll be glad to go on any interview you wanted. And I wound up starting out with a small New England mutual company. And I knew nothing really about the company. Found myself with a bunch of people in the same boat that I was and started in sales. And really did not enjoy that. But what I found was, what I did enjoy was I started talking to the claims folks, and they helped me understand more about the contract and what problems that people were encountering and how insurance addressed that. And I found the mechanics of the insurance more interesting than it was in the selling technique. Wound up leaving that company, and with another fellow who was working there, we joined someone with deep pockets, and we picked up an insurance agency, and did that for a while, but it was just, it wasn't for me. And I wound up in 1975 going to work with MetLife's startup insurance operation for property and casualty. I was like employee number 300, and started working on text and training materials, and did a lot of road travel, and wound up getting back into the service side again. And while working there, I was kind of tapped, and I wound up in an intern position for 3.5 years working in the president's office, working for his chief of staff. And he was a wonderful gentleman, probably one of my biggest role models for forever, went on to become an insurance commissioner and just wonderful guy. And so working as an intern in his office, you begin to see how the whole thing falls together. And he would debrief us at the end of the day. What did you learn? What questions do you have? So I found it really kind of fascinating. And that started a career 1975, and I retired from the company in 2012. So I never left. Wound up staying in corporate, had some opportunities. I was lucky, stayed in corporate, wound up through, probably 3 or 4 changes in leadership. A couple times had to kind of duck down and get under the desk for a while to just make sure that I survived, but wound up ultimately getting into strategic planning, working on some of the mergers and acquisitions teams, and then really kind of started a CI operation back in the mid to late 80s inside of strategic planning. And pretty much that and state management were my focus right through the end of my career. And so held a lot of different titles and different jobs working with different leadership teams. But it was kind of really a fascinating time and gave me a great opportunity to kind of see how all of the pieces fell together in the business. And found the challenge in working with a lot of younger people in trying to take what can look like something very, very complex, just trying to make it simple, easier to understand, and just start spoon feeding people only what they needed, not more than what they could handle. And pretty much became, my mentor, my role model, and later in life was Brian Sullivan, probably the premier storyteller in the business. Not a reporter, not an expert, but one of the best storytellers. And I was very, very fortunate to get to know him fairly well, like Randy, and it was just that the 3 of us sometimes would have these great conversations with him whenever we had a chance. And so I found my career and my niche kind of late in life being a storyteller, and just in gathering information to be able to put together stories, and then just relating important things to people in the form of stories. And that's why I considered myself probably a storyteller for my career.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's some good stuff. And in fact, I exchanged emails with Brian Sullivan this weekend.
You guys are so fortunate, let me tell you, because every time we try and get Brian, it was always, there was a bit of a conflict because he'd have either, I believe it was either AIR or PIR, either his conferences going on very, very close to ours, and knowing how hard he works and prepares. Once or twice we did manage to get him, to lure him out to one of our events, and it was standing room only. He is just one of the preeminent storytellers. I don't know that there'll ever be anybody like Brian again. I hope there are, but just you guys are so fortunate to have him at your annual conference.
Yeah, it's great. He participated last year, and he's going to speak again this year. And at his AIR conference, I think starts next week, and he's actually promoting the Smith and Mangum Distinguished Service Award at his event. So,
well, as you know, Randy was. I mean, Carol attended a number of the events, but Randy was one of the few people I think that I ever saw get up in Brian's grill and just kind of disagree with him and tell him he didn't know what he was talking about. And I don't think anybody ever did that to Brian, but Randy would do that, as you know, only Randy could. Right. And he would be glad to tell Brian all the things he didn't know. So I think there was a very jocular back and forth, and that's wonderful because both Carol and Randy are just, they were a big part of my career. As I've often said, I just met some of the most wonderful people in the insurance business. It's just a shame I never worked with any of them. So it was those kind of people, and they're one of a kind, but there are a lot of them, and I'm sure there are more of them out there. And I'm glad that the SIR is able to pull them together behind the curtain and get them around the campfire.
That's right. So tell me, let's talk about SIR a little bit. Let's talk about when you first found SIR and how you got involved and transition from, just an attendee and participant to one of the leaders of SIR?
Actually, good question. Attended my first SIR event. It was a workshop, St. Louis. I was working as the intern's position, and we, as a company, were very, very supportive of an organization, AIRAC at the time. It was All Industry Research Advisory Council. It's now the IRC, and I believe part of the institutes. And I was kind of a designee to participate. Our president was on the board, and I was designated. And so it was a great organization, but I wanted to kind of spread my wings a little bit more. And I can't remember whom somebody mentioned the society. And I hadn't heard of it. And of course, you didn't have the internet necessarily to jump on and just kind of go do your research. So I decided to go attend a workshop. And I attended it. It was the Spring Workshop 1979. John Cherba was the president that year. And I was kind of really blown away. I came back very impressed. Impressed more with the people, both from a technical standpoint and the exchange of information. But there was a couple there that kind of took me under their wing. I was the new kid in the room. I'm in a room where everybody seems to know everybody, and I don't know them, because the workshops tend to be not like the annual conference at that time. And that was Stan Hop and Ginger. And they kind of took me under their wing. And I went to dinner with them, and they introduced me to people. And I came back saying, there's something here. There's something more than just a source to go get some information. So maybe I'll go to the annual conference. And so I came back and told the boss, I said, I think this has got a lot of potential, both for personal development, but also I think a place for us to have a role. So I went back to the annual conference, and I had a break in service with the SIR, probably 83 to 85. We went through a leadership change, and everybody was just heading for the doors, and I just got low and kind of stuck to my service operation. But then I rejoined back in 85, and I had just felt there had been something. But even up to that point, I had been pretty much a hunter-gatherer. I was there to gather information, bring it back to the powers that be at intergalactic headquarters, and just kind of share whatever I learned. But I was also building some people that I met that I kind of liked. Mike Murray was where I met Mike. And I started meeting a whole bunch of people. Diana at that point, she and Terry Troxel. And, it was kind of, I really kind of enjoyed it. So when I rejoined in 85 under another leadership team, I said, I'd really like to spend more time and participate in small little ways. So I just volunteered. I said, you need somebody cleaning tables, doing anything, I'm available. So I really liked being around the group. And that's when I began this whole mindset. I started thinking of the SIR as summer camp. Now, everybody you talk to, whether it's Jeff or you talk to Candace or Diana, everybody has a different way of expressing kind of the same dynamic with the SIR. Right. That somehow there's a camaraderie and there's a sense of relationship that goes far beyond just a bunch of professional people getting together in a room and talking to each other. And I likened it to my summer camp experiences, where I worked many years in a summer camp, worked my way up to a waterfront director. But the thing I enjoyed the most were the almost nightly campfires, where everybody would get together and there'd be stories told and things, songs sung and information shared, and you just kind of bonded, and you never wanted the campfire to end. It was in the evening, you just didn't want to leave. You wanted to stay a little longer around the campfire, and it was dark, but the fire and everybody's face, it was just special. And so I began to think of the SIR as camp, but really more the campfire. And I've used that analogy all during my time with the SIR, was that it was our job to find more people and bring them around the campfire. And so I just said whatever I could. Of course, everybody's got a full-time job. So during the 80s, did some promotion around the associate in research and planning, another topic that maybe we get to touch on a little bit, that was developed. And got, as a matter of fact, I think the second graduating class had 3 of the people that were working with me that I had who were kind of fast trackers that were kind of assigned to work with us at that point in strategic planning. And so got involved there, and then volunteered wherever I could at workshops and whatever. And then in the 90s began to take a greater role wherever I could, to just being a speaker, a panelist, or whatever. And that's where I think the leadership team that kind of during my period of time there kind of took control, if you will, began to come together. 1994, Wendell Larson had Wendell come into our company because Fair Isaac was just starting to do some wonderful stuff. And I invited Wendell to come to the company, and in return, I think it was probably in New Orleans, I've worked on a panel with him. So there was kind of a give and take, but our team began to come together. And then in the probably early 2000s, started to meet, Candace, Denise, Randy, I had met, and we're kind of exchanging information then. But I could just go around Gary Hodge, I could go around the room with Carol Smith, and it was a team. And we began a little bit of a change, and I credit Candace with this. The old format used to be that the old board would meet right before, at the beginning of the annual conference. You'd probably come in on late on a Sunday and have a meeting. And then after the conference was over, the new board would meet. But everybody's trying to catch a plane, they're out the door and whatever. And then from there on in, it was they might have a meeting at the workshop. And Candace brought together that idea of, basically it turned into a 3-day meeting that she hosted out in California in January, which was an annual planning meeting. And it was 3 days of everything from just putting together a business plan, who's going to do what, who can backfill for whom, and then going out to dinner together, and then after dinner sitting together and talking. So it was 3 days of immersion in SIR and business. And of course, Ed had, we lost, Stan, and Ed was, working mightily to try and pick up where Stan had left off. A lot of it had been in the 6 inches between Stan's ears, and suddenly we're trying to recreate things and understand our tax filing status. So there was back office stuff, but then there was the member facing. And that's where I think the team evolved. And so you had a group of people in a room. The title didn't matter. When it came to membership, everybody had ideas, everybody was volunteering. When it came to getting speakers, you need a speaker, who is it? What do you need? I think I know somebody who can talk to them. So the pieces became exchangeable and just started moving the pieces around, so that whether you were president-elect, past president, annual conference or whatever, when it came to the annual conference, it was all hands on deck. What can we do? And who can we reach out to? And I really like that. So there was a period of time really from the early 2000s through 2012 when I retired, that basically we were part of a team for probably Denise and Gary, and I could probably going to leave some people out, but it was just more of a team management approach rather than individuals, with specific titles, and everybody had a role to fill. And Mike was in the middle of that. Mike Murray had come back, had resurrected himself. And so that was kind of the time that is probably the most recent in my memory, but there are fond memories. I've often said that I'd love to get Mike Murray back, just to bring the old band back together again. In the early 80s, Mike was responsible for a conference. It was the Planning and Economics Conference. And Mike brought in people who saw the industry differently. He brought in the buy-side analysts and the sell-side analysts. He brought in the analyticals from the various rating agencies. And so it was about planning, but it was also about the economics of our business and how our business interacts with the economy. And it attracted people that I don't think otherwise would have thought of themselves as SIR groupies. But once you got hooked on his conferences, you were going back, held in the same place down in Crystal City, down in Arlington, Virginia. And it was a relatively brief conference. I recall it was about 2 days, but it was just fascinating. And Mike was the moderator, and Mike had all the connections to be able to reach out. And people I relied on later in my years, Jay Gelb, Jay at the time, I think was with Merrill Lynch, one of the sell side analysts. And I started meeting these people and exchanging pleasantries with them and asking them if they would be kind enough to put me on their distribution list for their research that they were doing for their investors. And they started just sharing this information with me. And it opened up another element of my curiosity about the business, about the whole economics of the business and the economic drivers behind the business and the finances, which tied into strategic planning and what I had been doing anyhow. But I always thought it'd be great to resurrect Mike. And I'm kind of getting off topic here, but it brought some great people together, and it was a lot of fun. And Mike always brought that very analytical approach to the board, if you will, or to our group, but also he brought incredible contacts, just incredible contacts. So that was kind of where I wound up in kind of a blur from probably 2000. I think I formally became a director in 2005 or 2006, and sat in one chair or another for the next 6 years. But it was just a fun time, and I learned so much from that group, just on a very personal level as well as on a professional level. And it's something you just can't tangibly identify everything, but it was just. It was very reassuring, and I made some wonderful and fast friends, and I don't see them as often as I'd like to these days, but it's just, they're friendships you're just going to keep for the rest of your life. So
yeah, but I know we were talking earlier about this analogy that I just wanted you to take just a couple minutes and kind of share with the audience about the transition from hunter-gatherer to giver. Tell us a little bit of that story, because I think it's powerful.
Well, like everybody else, when I joined, or when I first attended the SIR, people come for, and I told you it's a harsh word, but and I mean it lovingly, but they come for selfish reasons. Mm-hmm. They come to find something that they can take back, or they can take to themselves in either the form of personal development, learning more about the industry that they're in and understanding they're in a competitive environment when they go back home to their companies, and also to be able to act as a hunter-gatherer, to come back with a one sheet, here's what I learned, and here's some nuggets and some information that I picked up that nobody else here in the company was ever going to know, except for the fact that I was the one who stepped forward and went to an SIR event. And so it's a bit selfish, but they do that, and they find it interesting because at the SIR events, there's a whole bunch of people that just seem very comfortable and very, very happy with giving out stuff. Whether it's the vendors or it's the people that are working, it just, they're real happy and just giving away information. And it's kind of unusual. But what happens is over time, if they come back again, because it worked the first time, I'm coming back and getting some more information, and I'm networking, and I'm developing a network of people I can contact in case I need them. And it begins an evolution. They start getting around the campfire a little bit. Mm-hmm. And suddenly they start seeing these, it's strange, but these strange people seem to get tremendous delight out of telling you everything they know or everything that they think. They're not holding anything back. They're not hoarding it. They're not trying to barter what they know for something from you. Mm-hmm. And that's a very, very strange phenomenon. But they begin to realize these people are happy and they seem to get along, and they love just talking to people and sharing and exchanging. and, you know, and at first it seems a little strange, and you figure, well, maybe these are all Midwesterners, you know, or Southerners who are just really nice people to begin with. But then you begin to realize that this is a part of what the SIR does. It's kind of in their DNA. You didn't see it in the box when you opened the box that was going to be an event or a membership, or, you know, or an online website. It suddenly, these people start getting great satisfaction out of giving. And then the hunter-gatherers, many of them begin to open up a little bit. And they start exchanging what they think or what they don't know, or aspirationally what they'd like to do. And little by little, they don't want to leave the campfire either. And they realize that the price of being a member of the permanent campfire is in bringing stuff to an event to give away, rather than attending an event to try and take everything you can out and suck everything you can out of the event. And so that's when the transition, I think, takes place to suddenly, maybe I can participate as a panelist, or maybe I can do a little of this, or maybe I can do a little of that, because I want to be around these people. You know, I want to have that kind of a smile. I want to kind of have that satisfaction that they have. And as I told you, when it transitions to the point where your best friends in the industry are the people that are working with you at the SIR and around you. And unlike work, which can be too many dogs around too little dog food, you get around this group, and the great delight is in just sharing. It's just sharing what you know, being honest about what you don't know, but what you want to learn, and in being willing to be open and enjoy each other's company. And yet, as I said, you can't put that in a flyer. You can't put it in a website. You can't tell people that this is what you're going to get if you join. But I think once that kind of gets under their skin, it's what keeps them coming back, and what in tough times will get them fighting within their organization, fighting as hard as they have to make sure that the organization stays the course with them or with the organization. And it was one of the things that I was a little worried about when we introduced the idea of corporate memberships, because that was we had a big discussion around that. It wasn't just a given. Because really, up until a certain point, all memberships were individual memberships. But the idea was to open a corporate membership so that during the tougher times, when maybe it might be tough for somebody to make an argument to go to an event and join the society, that if you had a corporate, you could pick the right person to go. In other words, suit up the topic with the individual. But that becomes a bit antithetical, I think, to the idea of getting people to come around the campfire and come around the campfire and come around the campfire. Because I think my fear was that the corporate membership would encourage more hunter-gatherer behavior and less of the path of becoming an SIR groupie. Yeah. And so we had those conversations, and it was great. And I think corporate memberships are a great way, an umbrella to get people around the campfire and bring them around. But it's that whole element of personal relationships and interaction that I think is critical to get people to want to come back. And regardless of the topic, if you only go for a specific subject about what you know, you're not addressing all the stuff you don't know. And as I said, if I hadn't gone to the planning and economics conferences, I went as many years as I could to start listening to some of the analysts and everything, I would never have gone down the route that I did, where I spent a lot of time pulling apart SEC filings, and Randy and I would kind of go over all this stuff. We'd going through SEC filings and going through the analyst reports and whatever. There's another whole universe there. And had I not been exposed to it, thanks to Mike Murray, that would have been a key element that later was an important element for me that I never would have found. And once again, it was the SIR that introduced me to it.
That's awesome. All right. Well, let's see. We got a couple minutes left and two questions. So first of all, as a student of the industry, I know that you have been retired since 2012, but you're still an insurance professional for life, right? You never lose that, right?
It's in your blood.
What are you seeing now that's piquing your curiosity? What kind of trends are going on in the industry that you're you find exciting, or that are opportunities for the industry to pursue in the insurance field?
Well, I think the availability, first of all, the availability, the overwhelming availability of data. For a greater part of my career, it was always a problem because there never seemed to be enough. You could never get your hands on enough. And I do think my feeling has been that there's still a lot to be learned that's hidden in plain sight. Whether you're talking about data mining, that's probably an overused term by these days, but back then, using metadata to be able to search information. I just think hidden in plain sight, what we tried to do, and what I'd say is my regrets. I've got a ton of regrets of things that I had always hoped to accomplish that we never did, many, many more than what I think I was able to even influence. But Mike Murray and another good dear friend, Ken Boker, and I, we pulled together a summit in San Antonio. And we brought together pricing, underwriting, and claims. And having spent some time talking and spending a lot of time training and educating and talking to our claims people, there's just a ton of information there that's hidden in plain sight that I think we tend to quantify and put into pivot tables and pass along to pricing or underwriting. But there's little things that are involved. There's a lot of information that claims has that's just buried there. And our whole goal was to figure out how to integrate that information. And I think with technology today, I think the companies that are really trying to are mining every source of information they have, whether it's customer information from the interactions of their call centers. I used to go out and have pizza parties, with our call center folks. I'd buy the pizza, bring in some soft drinks, and just say, hey, what do you hear? What's going on? What's important? Kind of asking this question, if you will, from the people who are interacting with their customers every day. Right. And they would tell me stuff, and their supervisors would be there, and I'd say to them, did you know that? And to them, it was new to them too, but nobody had ever bothered to ask. Right. And the same way with claims. So I think I'm really, really thrilled with the fact that today we have that capacity to be able to capture that data. And instead of trying to put it into a pivot table or put it on the spreadsheet, but being able with metadata to be able to share adjuster notes. An adjuster says, who the hell ever underwrote this risk and thought that putting a washing machine on the second floor was a smart thing to do? And it's just, how do you capture that information that, what's going on? And I think Brian, once again, is a storyteller, knowing the work he does. Brian, as you know, in just about every conference, there's claims people there because he understands how critically important that is. And he's been singing that song for ages. But I think that information, and then I think the battle that goes on from a customer perspective of the Geicos, and I respect Geico deeply, but the Geicos of the world that have tried to kind of commoditize insurance, and it's make it a joke or make it funny. Progressive's been doing that with Flo, and Carol Smith and I had many conversations over this. But the commoditization bothers me a little bit because then the default comes exclusively onto the shoulders of pricing. And pricing is an imperfect science. I witnessed that firsthand. It's a very imperfect science. And so commoditizing it, on the other hand, taking the old Allstate approach, the Perry Mason approach, that, oh my God, you're going to lose the house, you're going to lose the kids, they're going to take your dog and everything else. If you didn't pick the right amount, you need somebody, with a PhD in insurance to tell you what limits you should select. And somewhere in between is probably the way we should be represented. But I do have a little concerns over the commoditization because it then tends to default back to price. And with price comes a tremendous emphasis on cutting cost, claim cost, and back office operational cost. And so, in the old days, there was a reason the mutuals charged what they did. It was because of the services that they provided. So I'm a little concerned about that. I'm delighted with the proliferation of data and the way data can be shared and exchanged. Delighted with the evolution of a lot of the I call them business partners, but the vendor services that you can go out and buy versus years ago, you had to have deep pockets, a big IT department. You really had to have a lot going. And the bigger you were and the more money you had, the smarter you could be. Today, you can buy those services. And so I'm delighted about the data. I'm a little worried about the commoditization and oversimplifying the whole back office, that it all just comes back down to infotech, and we can just absolutely cut some corners and just charge a real low price.
Yeah, those are good observations. Our last question is maybe the most important. And I think you hit on some of it when we were talking about SIR, but what additional recommendations do you have for our members today? You know, what should they be doing to improve themselves, their organizations, their participation in SIR? You know, what are your thoughts, recommendations for members that are SIR?
Well, a couple of things. First, one of the things that I think you guys have really kind of stepped up and are doing it electronically. But I had always thought that regionalizing some of our SIR activity to smaller areas. I was very, very fortunate. I got the green light, and I won't name some people because I don't want to embarrass them. But there were people that helped me, deliver information to some very important decision-making choices that had to be made. And in return, my boss, who was the president at the time, said, do whatever you've got to do ethically and legally, but do whatever you can do to help these people who helped you. Mm-hmm. So we started meeting. I'd drive into a restaurant and then just spending an afternoon and just kind of shooting the breeze instead of doing it over the phone, getting together. And we invited a couple of other people that were in the same line of business at the time from a couple of different companies. And we said, wouldn't it be fun to just have like a one-day get together, and just kind of get some of the more regional people. Once again, it was a mini campfire, for lack of a better term. And you're doing that now with some of your webinars and your conversations, but the exchange of information was important. Right. So sometimes if we're not careful, webinars and everything can kind of be, it's not really communication, it's transmission. It's information coming from one way going out rather than the interchange. And I found the interchange is where really your ideas are challenged and it works. So I thought somehow regionalizing, spending more time locally where people just have to get in a car and go to lunch and maybe take an afternoon of just sitting and chatting somewhere. And there are, we used to take over this one restaurant in a particular place. I swear they were going to throw us out, but we just sit there and we didn't want it to end because we'd just be sitting there and just exchanging information. You can do it over the phone, but it's very different when you're doing it in person. The other thing is our emphasis on education. That's where we come from, the SIR. And you and I know on previous occasions have talked about that, whether it's resurrecting the associate in research and planning or using the Griffith Foundation, which is now the Griffith Insurance Foundation, as a part of the Institute. I think that the Griffith Foundation, I really had wanted to just do more work with the educational end of our business, whether it's this Katie School of Insurance. I know State Farm does a lot of work with the Katie School, the University of Illinois, Southern Illinois, I believe. Anyhow, it's the Katie School of Insurance. And I know for a fact that State Farm recruits a lot of its interns who learn and become interns and become employees. So I always thought that reaching out in the educational arena, rather than waiting until somebody becomes a newbie in our industry, reaching out to those that have raised their hands and say, hey, I think that's the reason you're getting an education is because you think that that's going to be your future. And finding a way that we can give and take some of that big giving attitude that we have as a society. And instead of just offering a discount to interns or young people who want to come or offering them a free conference, getting involved in their schools, getting involved in their programs, whether it's, I think it's the Fisher School, Griffith came out of Columbus, which is really where the SIR was, the birthplace of the SIR. In Ohio State, we always thought it'd be fun to have an event at Ohio State, an SIR event, and invite the insurance students, the students that are studying or majoring in insurance, to invite them from the Fisher School of Business, which is where their insurance program's housed, and invite them to attend and have a joint session with them. Not just inviting them to attend one of ours, but have an event intended to focus on education and to find out a little bit more about how they're making their decisions, what's important to them, what are the critical things, what are the things that the education isn't providing them that needs to be provided and that they're looking forward to. So I felt bad that we never really got to do the outreach there. I can tell you that State Farm has been and still is very intimately involved in the whole educational process, whether it's, you know, on the board of directors, on the institutes, whether it's being very involved with the Katie School. So I think reaching out to people one step down before they even get into our business, and those that are doing that. And I thought that was something that there was a place for us. So it's not really research per se, but it's education. And I think the AARP is then a logical place that once they get into the business to step up. And because otherwise, I think the path that appeals to them in the institute's promoting is the CPCU or any of the designations from the institute. But I just think education is really absolutely critical. And I think that that's something that we need to reach out as an organization to individuals who are considering this for a career. And instead of letting other people help make the decision for them, to just offer them some perspectives. And we have the people, you have the skill, you have the skilled members that are there. And if people are looking for another opportunity to give in the SIR, here's an opportunity to do that through outreach. So that to me was one of the things I felt that I just never really had a chance to really kind of get a hold of, and wish that if I'd had more time, I would love to have seen would have been just that outreach to the educational community.
Well, thank you. That's some good idea starters and something for us to discuss as a board on ways we might be able to, you know, make progress in that area. So thanks for sharing that. I think we're near the end of our time together. And one thing I'll commend you on is you started out, when talking about your career, on thinking about yourself as a storyteller. Well, you haven't lost anything in that area. you're a great storyteller, and I appreciate you sharing some time today, you know, to tell us about your time in SIR and your career and share your insights. You're still a giver, and I appreciate it. So thank you again, Herb.
I'm always, you know, it's just things change, but some things stay the same. And there are a bunch of us, whether it's Ed or anybody, and if Randy were around, he'd be saying the same thing. We'd be on the sideline cheering you on. I think what the team has done and what you continue to do just really makes us so proud. It's just done. It's great. And I really do believe that the best years for the industry are still yet in front of them. I think this was all just prelude to kind of get to the point where, with the critical mass that you've got, that you can really do the things that need to be done, and that I think are going to give all of your participating members great satisfaction. And so we're always on the sideline cheering you on.
Thanks a lot. And presidents are members for life. So whenever you want to jump it back in, you're welcome.
Well, it's real. And just the last thing, and real quick, I spoke of this at Ed's retirement. Colin Powell had a great book. He wrote a number of books on leadership that I really appreciated. But there's a chapter in one book, and he talks about life or professions or whatever as being a train. And he said, you get on the train and you ride the train, and it goes through different turns and different stops, and it's wonderful, but you never want to get off. And then he said, one day a stop comes along and the train stops, and it's your stop. He said, and it's time to get off. It's your time to get off. He said, and there are so many people that don't want to get off. They know it's their station, but they don't want to get off. They just want the ride to continue. And 2012 was kind of my stop came up. And, I got off the train. Reluctantly, I love this, like my friend Ken Boker, I'll probably stop telling stories 3 days after my funeral. But, it was one of those things that it's your stop. So it was my time. And it's so great to just see people blossoming into the roles that they've blossomed into and taking responsibility. And I know Randy and Carol and Denise and all of us would either or do just really, really stand on the sidelines and just cheer you guys on. You're just doing an awesome job. So it's great to watch.
Well, thanks again, Herb. I appreciate it, and hope you're enjoying that stop in Florida.
Oh, I am. I would. It was hard to walk away from insurance, but it's not hard to walk away from the sunshine.
Right.